Good afternoon, everyone on the East Coast and Central Time Zones. Good morning for everybody on the West Coast. My name is Steve Schramm. I'm joined by Ben Walker. You're here for the Environ webinar, Powering the Future, Practical Strategies for Renewable Energy Integration and Cost Reduction in Healthcare Facilities. Again, my name is Steve Schramm. I'm joined by Ben Walker. We just want to take a moment for this webinar to introduce ourselves. I come from the healthcare background. I've spent about 15 years in healthcare supply chain. I've served for critical access hospitals all the way to level 1 trauma centers, including children's hospitals and world-renowned orthopedic hospitals. And I'm going to give Ben a moment to introduce himself.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, so I have been working with hospitals for over a decade now. Started in hospital energy, for those who might recognize that name, and we became Environ about 5 years ago. But it was kind of over that time, worked with ASHE to develop the best practices for financing energy sustainability. So I'm really excited to chat with you all today. And I live in Salt Lake City, Utah.
And I'm from New York.
I think we have a poll question we might want to throw up now. Allison, if you're available.
So just going to read this on screen for folks. What do you hope to learn from this session? This is interactive, so we really appreciate you giving us some feedback here. If you could take a moment just to answer the poll question, and we'll address it later on in this webinar. And while we're waiting for folks that will be in attendance for the ASHE Innovation Conference next month, I will see you in Columbus, Ohio.
Yeah, I think we're ready to close the poll. So thank you for those who participated. Today's topics you can see on the left. Steve will kind of carry us through the introduction a little bit more now, and I think I'm excited for us to get underway.
Sure. Yeah, if we can advance to the next slide. So I understand we have a mix here of current clients as well as potential customers who do not know what Environ is or who we are. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview. We were founded as Hospital Energy back in 1995 from our founder, Mark Minenberg. We started as an energy procurement broker, and we have since, in the last couple of years, advanced, integrated multiple organizations. So now we are a full-service energy management and sustainability firm. On the procurement side, we manage roughly between 15 and 20% of the energy spend within the healthcare sector. We have worked alongside with AHA and ASHE, and we have co-authored best practices on energy procurement, business planning for resilience, as well as financing energy sustainability. We have worked alongside several organizations that have signed the HHS pledge. We worked hand in hand with one organization up here in the Northeast to meet the requirements and acquire the Joint Commission Decarbonization or Sustainability Certificate, the first one in the country. So we are very proud of that work. And we are integrated with both the national and regional organizations for ASHE and all the chapters there. So today we're going to talk about why buying renewables, and I'm going to juxtapose two principles for you. The first is the Hippocratic Oath, which is to do no harm. Obviously, our physicians and our nurses execute that oath within their clinical practices, but then when you juxtapose that with the waste and all of the greenhouse gas emissions produced from the healthcare system, they are two competing kind of priorities here. So I'm going to turn it over to Ben to kind of talk about the importance of renewable energy and to deliver renewables to our community and to our health systems.
Great, thank you, Steve. And yeah, we want these slides to be a resource for you, so they will be distributed at the end of the call. in the work days following the end of the call, I should say. So to kind of jump in there a little bit, some of you are under some sort of a sustainability target. That could be compliance driven, could be voluntarily driven, it could be a certificate, a wide variety of things. We work with clients across the spectrum, whether it's science-based targets or something like BERDO, which is on the screen here, which is the Boston buildings emissions targets. And they all typically follow a pattern like that black line, right? We've got some sort of a target that feels fairly achievable in the short term and ramps down over time. To the point in the box on the top right, there are 3 typical levers that we see, and it's usually in this order, that hospitals target efficiency first, electrification second, and they kind of rely on that greening grid. And renewables tend to come in third, to decarbonize the last few pieces. That's not always the approach, but I would say that that's fairly typical, is to see that order of operations there. And you'll see scope 1 and scope 2 here on the slide. Kind of keeping that in your mind, there are 3 different emission types that we often talk about. Scope 1 comes from on-campus, so that is usually combustion, but it can be things like anesthetic gas leaks or inhalers and things like that. So that was scope 1. Scope 2 is purchased energy, usually electricity, sometimes steam, and then scope 3 is kind of everything else. For those of you just getting started, the scope 2 emissions are from your electricity. You just take the eGrid region, which is on the EPA, you look up your emissions intensity, you multiply that times your annual energy usage, and you get the amount of carbon emitted. Those of you who are more sophisticated or kind of learned and deeper in this space, there are differences between carbon dioxide emissions versus carbon dioxide equivalents. You can also do a location-based versus a market-based inventory approach. I mentioned that this grid on the right, this eGrid data, that is the location-based method. That is by far the most common. But if you are taking voluntary steps to purchase green energy, which we're going to talk about today, those are reasons why you might choose the market-based approach. And then also those numbers can change over time. So making sure that you're not just using kind of the current stand-in for 10 years of data, and when you would set a baseline. We do have carbon software and a variety of software tools to help with these kinds of things if you're interested. There are a variety of options out there for you. So level setting, we're going to be talking a lot about scope 2 emission reduction opportunities today. And most of that falls into renewable energy procurement. So depending on who you ask, it's a little bit of an art and a little bit of an art and less of a science. I like dividing it into 4 different buckets. I've seen as many as 8, but I think a lot of those can be combined. The 4 different buckets being on-site, so you're putting it on a rooftop, a carport, something like that. That's often called behind the meter because it's the electricity grid goes to your meter, and then you're putting your solar or renewable energy behind that. The second one being offsite credits. So this is community solar or virtual net metering or remote net metering credits or distributed generation. Every state has their own acronym there. The third being the wholesale hedge, which is the VPPAs or PPAs that often get big headlines. This is what Meta, Facebook, Amazon, those are the ones that are often signing big splashy agreements like that. And then the last one is renewable energy certificates, or RECs only. These assets are 20+ year assets. And so as we start at the top, that's a 20-year commitment because the service provider really only has one group they can sell the electricity to. If you put solar on your roof, you have to buy it. So they really do need you to commit for that full 20-year term. As we go down the table, there are more and more liquid options for them to find other off-takers. And so that's why you see the time commitment be a little bit less as we move down the table. And then the savings is a big question here too, right? So in the top 2, you're often able to reduce your costs. And in the third one, the wholesale hedge, really just depends on how the market moves. We've seen really big savings numbers if somebody signs at the bottom of the market and the market goes up, but the savings is not guaranteed like it is kind of in the offsite credit option. And then the REC only option is almost always a pure cost. So very briefly, what to look at if you are doing behind the meter solar. Um, you know, really you want at least 30,000 square feet of space. If you can have more than 100,000, which is about a football field, um, that's where you really start to get the best economics on these projects. And then ideally you're in two of the dark regions across the US, right? So you have high energy rates, or you have a lot of sunshine, or you have a lot of incentives. The map on the right changes all the time. The map in the middle never changes, or at least not on human timescales. And then the map on the left is fairly stable. So you can kind of self-select here of where it's worth looking at that. There are a few things to be very careful with in terms of analysis of how we treat energy charges versus demand charges. I'll get into that a little bit later, but make sure you're doing a very careful analysis if you are looking at this. So that's the first one. I think it's kind of the most standard and most straightforward. The second one we'll broadly call community solar. Each state is going to have their own acronym and their own program. But at a high level, there's a community solar developer who builds a solar farm offsite. The nice thing about them being offsite, it doesn't impact your operations at all. This is just somewhere in your utility zone that's not influencing how you have energy that's delivered or used in your facility. That offsite power is then sent to an energy meter, which is at the solar farm, which is the energy is then audited and turned into a dollar credit value based on the state's formula. And then those dollar credits are applied to your energy bill. So this is really more of a cost reduction approach than anything else. The reason the states have these incentive programs is so they can meet their sustainability targets. So often you don't get to claim any sort of renewable benefit. You just get to have the dollar savings. You can claim that you're supporting solar in the community, but it's really not lowering your emissions directly. The benefit, though, is you can use these programs to develop cost reductions, which then you can potentially invest into other, whether it's efficiency projects or on-site projects, but it kind of creates an opportunity for you to use those dollars as you see fit. A map here indicating which states have those programs. The dark green states are kind of active and good, I would say strong programs. The shaded green are states that have either reached some sort of a cap on participation or have had a pilot program that is kind of fully subscribed, or in some cases, leaning towards residential after having a commercial option kind of earlier on in the process. So it's harder to make it work there. The big thing here is just that fourth bullet under the summary. The solar developer is selling you $10 bills for $9. It's really kind of that simple, right? So they need your commitment to obtain financing to go build this project. They are relying on the state's incentive program to make that work. And the way that you are participating is you're committing to essentially getting a 10% discount on your utility bills for the life of the project, which is about a 20-year commitment. And again, apologize for the text here. I know it's a lot to read, and I don't want to read at you, so these will be provided to you later on. So I'm going to move on here to the wholesale energy markets. So this is the third option, which is the wholesale hedge. So there's a fun history of how the energy markets deregulated in the US, kind of 1970s oil embargo to 1980s having competition drive down market rates, to the 1990s where the US started to deregulate. In the infancy of deregulation, we were building markets and there was some fraud, which caused us to pause. And we've been paused for the last 25 years. So half of the US is deregulated. And what that means is you can choose who you buy your energy supply from. You can choose what kind of asset you buy your energy supply from, whether you want to buy solar or hydro, or whether you don't care, in which case it's just going to come at the grid mix, which is going to be some gas, some coal, some nuclear, some hydro, some wind, some solar. So those markets where you can choose are called deregulated, or we would say you have energy choice. So if you're looking for that, we have a whole suite of procurement services that we can help you navigate that. do sort of a layered hedging approach and really try to minimize your volatility and your cost. That's why these markets were developed. The deregulated markets are New England, New York, what's called PJM, which stands for Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland. There are a lot of other states that joined PJM, but that's the Mid-Atlantic region, the Texas region, and then California. California, and then I have MISO in here too. Both California and MISO have requirements or wait lists that you have to get on to participate in these markets. So it's a little bit limited there. If you are in one of those markets, you have the option to buy a wholesale hedge from a asset that is a solar farm or a wind farm or any sort of specific thing, and that would be under a power purchase agreement. So you can sign a PPA in those regions. If you're outside of those regions, you're in a regulated area, you are required to buy your power from the local utility. It's a monopoly. It's vertically integrated, which means they control the generation and the distribution of power. So you don't have the same flexibility. What those markets offer is a green tariff. So sometimes the utility will have the standard tariff, and you can pay a different amount to get your power flowing from a specific green asset. Green tariffs are always an incremental cost, whereas the PPAs are usually kind of a market-based thing. So the performance of a PPA depends on, you sign it and the market could go up or down. So the savings from a PPA or the cost from a PPA depends on market performance. A green tariff is an incremental cost for you. So in those regions, that's where you can sign those kind of PPAs, or there's also a VPPA, which is a virtual power purchase agreement. And on the right, you can see the map of where those PPAs and VPPAs were signed in 2023. I'll note that Texas is 4 times the rest of the country. It's significant. So we actually had to scale down Texas quite a bit to make some of the other states visible. A lot of focus in Texas just because of the interconnection process. We can get projects built there much faster. The energy market structure in Texas is very favorable for renewables to participate. And there's a lot of resource. There's a lot of wind, there's a lot of solar, and both of those are going up. The other states, it just kind of varies depending on what the purpose is there. I've already mentioned that top one of, the performance, the financial performance depends on how the market moves. The second bullet there of price not equaling value, if you are looking to sign a power purchase agreement or a virtual power purchase agreement, if you get 2 offers, the cheapest one is not necessarily the cheaper one, if that makes sense. And that's because the value of the PPA depends on what power you're replacing. So the solar is going to be producing power during the daytime, whereas the wind is going to be producing power whenever the wind blows, which could be at night. And so there is an important step there to analyze at the hourly level what the generation profile looks like for the asset and what the pricing profile that it's replacing looks like. So just a word of caution if you are entering into that. And then lastly, I guess kind of the table at the bottom. So I'll mention 2 things on this. One is the green box. So if you are signing a PPA, you can choose to buy the RECs or not. If you do not buy the renewable energy certificates with the power, then you don't get to make any renewable claims. The reason for those RECs is to make sure, it's really an accounting practice, to make sure that whoever's making a claim is the one who's buying the electricity, and we're not having 2 or 3 or 4 people claim the same electron themselves. So that REC is how we ensure that the person who's using it is the person who ought to be, and there's not multiple people doing that. So the kind of the first question is the REC included or not? And so yes or no. If yes, it would be called bundled. So it's bundled because the power and the REC is sold together as one product. And then you also have this question of, is the power purchase agreement in your region or not? So those regions we looked at the previous map. If it's in your region, then that's a PPA, sometimes called a physical PPA, because it can be directly scheduled to your energy load. And it kind of just, if you've signed a traditional third-party energy contract, it just flows just like any other energy hedge. If it's outside of your region, that's called a virtual PPA, and that's settled financially. So it's as the power gets sold to the market, you've agreed to a strike price, and money is either flowing from the developer to you or from you to the developer, depending on whether the market is above or below the strike price. Those tend not to be great fits for healthcare because of the accounting implications. There is usually a mark-to-market sort of a approach that needs to be taken. We do have clients who pursue them. We don't have any healthcare clients who've pursued a virtual PPA. We'd be happy if you wanted to be the first. We'd be happy to explore that with you. But we tend to see hospitals pursue the PPA options if they are interested in this sort of a structure. So we're through 3 now. So we did behind the meter on site, we did community solar, and now we've done the wholesale hedge. So our 4th one would be the REC only, right, or renewable energy certificate only. So renewable generators produce multiple things when they produce 1 unit of power. They produce the electrons themselves, the electricity, they produce the tax credits, and they produce these RECs. And as we mentioned, if you buy the electrons and the RECs together, now you've bundled those, but you don't necessarily need to. Those can be sold separately. Kind of brief orders of magnitude, the electricity is worth about $40 a megawatt hour, depending on the market. The tax credits are worth about $18 a megawatt hour, although those are being those are in jeopardy given the Senate and House budget reconciliation process that are undergoing right now. And then the third is the renewable energy certificate. So that's the ability to claim the greenness of the power. And those are sold to one of 2 markets. They're sold to a compliance market where they're fairly lucrative. Again, 40 to about $300 in the edge cases. 40 is a much more standard number for those. Or they can be sold into the voluntary market, where we're looking at a $3 to $5 price. So exploring this, are we in a voluntary or are we in a compliance market? That market in the US is roughly 50-50. You can see with that chart on the left. The compliance market is the markets where states are required through their renewable portfolio standards to buy a certain percentage of renewable energy. So the states have the choice of how much power they want to come from clean resources. And a lot of them have passed targets that will say something like, let's do 20% by 2025 and increase 2% a year for the next 20 years. And so the legislature can pass that. If you are buying those RECs, you are paying, and if you're living in one of those states, you are paying what will look like an RPS cost on your utility invoice, on your supply invoice, excuse me. And so if you are on a fixed price, that might be hidden, but if you are passing through your RPS costs, you will see that direct line item. The energy supplier is going out and buying RECs on your behalf and retiring them. And so in some states, in Maine, for example, you are already 63% renewable powered. Most of our clients aren't claiming that because this is kind of a newer thing for us to, as a country, to adapt to. Those targets have been traditionally fairly small until the 2020s. So it's still, I would say, a little bit uncomfortable for people to talk in that language of, hey, the grid is 50%, therefore we are 50% renewable. That's only true if you are buying those RECs through the RPS requirements, which again, in the states highlighted on the right, you are doing that. If you don't want to, if you want to buy more RECs above and beyond what is required, that's where you step into the voluntary market. And those are not required. Every purchase in the voluntary market is somebody trying to go above and beyond. So again, these are where people can say, hey, we got to 100% renewable. You can do that just by buying voluntary RECs. Those are much lower cost, right? So we're at $4 a megawatt hour. And the reason you're doing this is just to meet PR goals or any sort of sustainability target. A note on these is that the quality can vary. So the Green E program is a certifying stamp. So they will come in and say, yes, this comes from a facility that is a renewable facility, was recently built, was registered appropriately, and they have their checklist that they walk through. So Greenie is by far the most common type of REC that is purchased in the market. It's not actually the most common that our clients buy. A lot of times our clients are looking to buy Green E eligible RECs, which is different from Green E certified. The difference just being a slight cost premium or decrease, with the idea that we're getting a lot of the same value by pursuing those that are eligible but have not gone through the certification process. So if you are interested in exploring kind of a voluntary REC purchase above and beyond, you can do that from any state. It doesn't matter where you are. You can buy a voluntary REC, whereas the RPS, the compliance markets, are kind of limited to what you're already paying in the top right. So very briefly, to talk more about the RECs, if you are buying RECs, things to consider: where it's produced, when it's produced, when the asset was built. So there, number 3 there on the left, there's this big idea of additionality when you're trying to buy RECs. Are you buying them from a 50-year-old hydro project, which isn't actually contributing any carbon reductions by supporting that? Or are you buying from a newer build project that really is adding value to our grid by adding kind of lower emission energy that wouldn't otherwise be there? So additionality can be a big thing. And then the 4th one there is your reason for buying, right? If you're trying to meet sustainability targets that are internal, there's kind of one set of objectives you're trying to meet that's very different from LEED certification. If you are pursuing LEED certification, Green E certificates are required. If you're doing something like building performance standards, like the Boston's BERDO that we talked about earlier, another example would be Local Law 97 in New York City. Those have even more stringent requirements, and so we need to kind of understand what the purpose is to help you find the right kind of REC to meet your goals. And then just to kind of highlight the map on the right, way back at the beginning when Steve was kind of talking about the Hippocratic Oath element, there was a part of that quote that suggested 2% of healthcare spending, or 100 billion, is kind of the economic damages coming from the environmental impacts that healthcare is having. Roughly 1 to 4% of your energy spend could be allocated to buying RECs, and that would get you to 100% green. And depending on what state you're in, you're paying between $1.50 and $4 to get to 100% green, once you account for the RPS targets that you're already buying, as we mentioned on the previous slide. So it is a pure cost to kind of get up to 100% renewable, but it's a smaller cost than you might think, and it retains the kind of 1-year flexibility, whereas the other 3 options we looked at really do come with kind of multi-year commitments. So from there, we wanted to kind of move on to the implementation and some of the financing implications. So those are some of the big ways that you would pursue renewables. And so let's look at some success stories and kind of ways to get these integrated into your portfolio. One big element, of course, is financing. And there is a big issue or challenge often of identifying a good project. But once you've got a really good project, how do we pay for it? So if you are looking at a capital expense approach, that can be a tough sell internally. Up until about 2022, it really didn't make sense for hospitals to take on the capital expense approach because there was a significant amount of tax credits available. I should say nonprofit healthcare. It didn't make sense for nonprofit healthcare to take on that capital expense because of they didn't have the tax exposure. And so with the passing of the Inflation Reduction Act, those tax credits became direct pay. And so that kind of opened the door for nonprofit health systems to consider renewables, kind of buying it themselves. But again, that door is threatened to be slammed shut with the current administration and what they're looking to change with the Inflation Reduction Act. And so it's really been the operational approaches that have been more common. Leases, power purchase agreements, things like that have been more effective for healthcare. They also changed the capital expense from looking at kind of an ROI of how many years can we pay back to an immediate savings opportunity where you're reducing your costs right away. So I wanted to kind of highlight this operational versus capital expense approach to financing. But once you've done all that, and you allocate the funds, you may need some specialized expertise to do the analysis correctly for the budgeted savings. Energy rates change year over year, and ensuring that you have a good solid expectation of what you might save, it can be an important step. And then it's a monitored verification, right? So confirm that you've achieved the savings you hoped. And then you face a choice. That choice is to return those savings to the core budget and help, the hospital broadly, which is a very common approach. Or you have the opportunity to reallocate those funds to future efficiency, sustainability type projects. And if you do that, now you've closed the loop, right? You've helped identify funds that can be used the next time we need to replace some sort of equipment, do an energy audit or some sort of a retrofit or an upgrade. And when you're able to close that loop, that's where it becomes a rolling green fund, where you kind of get started and then you just keep moving on, project to project to project. So that can be a very effective tool for those of you looking to kind of build a sustainability program or kind of expand one that's existing. Apologize for a lot of text on this slide as well. This is a cyclical approach to executing on projects. So if you do take that rolling green fund approach, you can kind of work through the process, right? And I really wanted to highlight with this table here, one of the things that we've found most important and most successful is having an energy committee. So whether you're looking at efficiency projects, sustainability projects, energy procurement, anything that you're doing that involves energy often should involve multiple stakeholders. Having both finance and facilities is vital. We've seen other parties join that from supply chain or maybe a sustainability focused professional. But really having those finance and facilities, the reason those two are so vital is because they're the ones who understand how energy is used and how energy is purchased. And having an open dialogue can really help kind of grease the wheels and ensure that projects are flowing and being successful. So the idea here of the table of, if you're struggling to find a good project, potentially identify an external expert who can come in with fresh eyes. If you're struggling to solve for upfront capital, we think some of the non-capital expense approaches are very, very successful in getting projects completed. If you're struggling to get the attention of decision makers, really go back to, do we have an energy committee, and are they meeting regularly? And then lastly, if you're struggling to contend, if you have a project that's struggling to contend with other internal priorities, you kind of revisit each of these above, ensure you have a good solid project that has good financing and has kind of buy-in from the committee. So wanted to give you this as a resource for you to refer to later on after our 1 hour together, which we're grateful for you to be spending the time with us today. Lastly, this was, whatever the 20-page financing best practices document condensed into one slide. So again, a little bit text heavy. The most important thing is, these really are 20-year assets that we're looking to install. And so we need to think on 20-year cycles. What are your campus expansion plans? Are you going to be adding, demolishing? Are you having a partner that is in it for the long haul with you, looking at they want to do operations and maintenance, that they're on board with that and they're excited about that. They'll be with you throughout that process. As we mentioned earlier, RECs are what verify or kind of solidify who gets to claim the renewableness, and they're where the PR elements and the scope 2 accounting elements, those are all tied to the REC. So make sure you understand how that's being treated. When RECs are more expensive in those compliance markets, a lot of times the developers do want to monetize them and sell those RECs so that they can give you a lower price. If that's what you want, great. And if that's not what you want, you need to communicate that. Consider, it says PPAs, but really any sort of a operational approach instead of a CapEx investment. If you're doing community solar, the % discount method is by far the preferred option. Any of those other options we looked at, from behind the meter to wholesale to both of those, PPA options are generally the preferred approach. And then kind of the fifth bullet point I'll mention here is ensure that you're being very, very careful to vet the financial analysis. Developers are often experts at construction, experts at working through the interconnection process, expert at the physical asset. And the financial analysis can sometimes get kind of brushed under the rug, where we've seen escalators be pretty aggressive. Let's assume that your energy rates will go up 3% a year for the next 20 years. That's a very, very aggressive assumption that significantly overstates the savings. So make sure that you're understanding where that the savings analysis comes from, and that you're comfortable with those assumptions. And especially with any sort of a kind of a project that has a generation profile attached to it, understanding the demand versus the energy, those ought to be modeled separately. You can get into kind of real sticky situations where, oh, we assumed that your energy rate all in was this, but not analyzing the balance of those two. The example being on-site solar will absolutely reduce your kilowatt hours. It may not reduce your kilowatts. If depending on the demand charge, some of those are calculated based on only 1 hour of a year. And if that hour happens when there's cloud cover, or there's some sort of a maintenance issue, you're not being able to capture a significant amount of the value from that system. To the end, we kind of discussed this already, of developers bringing their own financing. Specifically in healthcare, the reason that the ITC was a tax credit and not something that was directly payable until 2022 meant that for the vast majority of projects in the country, hospitals are not buying them with capital. They are instead using an operational approach to ensure that all of the value of the project can be captured, and that the developer can come with that tax credit appetite and solve for that. We're going to move on here to some success stories. So ways that we've gotten some of these projects over the finish line. And I'll start with one project that actually didn't get built, because I think sometimes as a success, doing a good analysis and ensuring that we have good projects is an important thing to focus on. So on the graph on the right, the dark green line, the top line, was what the asset developer said, this is what we think you will pay over the next 15 years. And then the black line was what the hospital was actually projected to pay based on their existing energy procurement agreements. So you can see there's a very big divergence in years 1, 2, and 3 from what the developer thought the hospital would pay and what the hospital energy was, or what the hospital's energy budget was contracted to be. And so the developer came in and said, you're going to pay green and we will charge you orange. And we were able to look at that and say, well, you can charge us orange, but we're actually going to pay black. And so the project that was kind of promised was, hey, there's $350,000 a year in savings for 15 years. And when we looked at the analysis, we said, you're probably going to be losing about $20,000 a year if you do this, because of these poor assumptions. And so they decided not to move forward. And what they did instead was they invested some of that money into efficiency projects. And so those kind of 4 bullets at the bottom, right? If we're looking for an on-site project, whether it's a fuel cell, whether it's solar, whether it's batteries, whether it's efficiency, a lot of times those projects are competing for the same pool. And that pool might be the same pool of dollars, the same pool of time and resources of your team, and really the same pool of kilowatt hours, right? If we lower our energy usage through efficiency, solar has less of an impact that we have fewer kilowatt hours to spread around. So really kind of ensuring that you're doing an analysis of on-site projects that covers kind of all your options is an important step. Another success project there, the middle section, we have a Maryland client who's looking to save about $40,000 a year over 25 years, 3 solar parking canopies. So they found a couple different properties and were able to contract that out. And the unique one there is the images on the right that you can see with the green and the orange. That is by far the more common approach, is we think you're going to pay this at some sort of regular annual escalator, and we're going to charge you this at some sort of a regular annual escalator. We were able to work with the developer to say, we would feel much more comfortable if we can keep the rates flat for 5 years, and then escalate it kind of starting year 6. And that just really helped with the cash flow to kind of improve the project there. And they were happy to kind of be flexible and work with us on that. Success stories for community solar. This is for the hospitals and health systems that are in states where these programs exist. These are very popular. In New York's program, it's like 5 years old now, I want to say. But the interesting there is they have it limited to 40% of an anchor is the commercial client, and the remaining 60% is reserved for residential. And so we had a hospital step in and take that anchor side and then reserve kind of a 90-day exclusivity window so that their staff and patients and their community members could sign up for that remaining 60%. And so it was kind of, yes, they got $55,000 a year in annual savings from this, which was great. But they were also able to kind of provide some community benefits to kind of put almost their balance sheet, right? Their commitment up front to say, hey, we're going to be in on this project. Why don't you guys come along with us? And so that was kind of a fun success story there. Maine had a very favorable program when it was launched. So we have about $400,000 a year for one of our hospital clients up there. Rhode Island is by far the most lucrative program in the country. Those savings are very unique, very large health system with a very, very lucrative program, but they're saving over $1 million a year. And it's more than that. It's pretty significant. So that's a unique situation to Rhode Island. But there's a variety of states. Illinois is really popping off. That's been developing recently. Maryland is coming around. So these are great programs. A lot of those first 3 all do require this long-term commitment. Environ does have relationships with developers where occasionally the developers have churn, where people who've signed up have to step off the project for whatever reason. Usually it's not a good reason. So usually it's a bankruptcy or some sort of a kind of a challenge of operations, because these programs are not only available to hospitals. And so the hospitals can come in and act as a recipient of these kind of one-time credit transfers. So you'll get a pitch that will look roughly like you can buy $750,000 of credits, and you buy those for $600,000. So you are achieving $150,000 of savings. And the cash flow implication is, you pay for those credits now, and then over the next 4 months we deliver them to your bills. And so you're kind of investing $750,000 up front to then get $150,000 of savings over the next 4 months with lower utility bills. So I would say that one's definitely been kind of an exciting project and programs for us where they exist. And lastly, we just wanted to point to some successful power purchase agreements that we've had. All of these are outside of healthcare. All the success stories so far have all been in healthcare. But specifically, we had a client who has an opportunity to save $600,000 a year for 20 years because they have land available in Pennsylvania. And Pennsylvania had a pretty unique program and project where they were able to sign this long-term agreement and kind of deliver immediate savings because of the land they owned was in a particular utility zone that had favorable regulatory projects available. The second one is where we have this image on the right. So I mentioned Birdo earlier. If you are under those requirements, you do have a target to meet, and if you don't meet your target, you pay a fine. You can avoid that fine if you buy RECs that are appropriate, and one of the 3 methods to buy RECs is associated with a virtual power purchase agreement, which is like this. And so you have to jump through a few hoops to make sure that you have the power purchase agreement structured in the right way. There are less than 10 of these that have been approved, and we have 2 of them where we're helping our client get approved so that they're reducing their fine exposure by about $500,000 a year. So that's some significant savings there. And then we have a third client who's in the real estate industry who signed at the bottom of the market. They did a great job, and they're collecting $3.2 million a year because they signed a very large power purchase agreement. Effectively, they are being paid $20 a megawatt hour to collect RECs. because they signed for a bundled power purchase agreement, and they're able to kind of make that happen and be successful. So there are a variety of ways to achieve your goals. I think part of what we wanted to communicate today was there's not one way to kind of achieve renewables, and there's not one reason you might be after it. And really, we really kind of want to help you along that journey wherever you are, and make sure that we're helping you design a program that really meets whatever objectives, requirements, and kind of cost implications or constraints you may have. So with that, Steve, I'll turn it over to you and kind of let you go through what some of those constraints and objectives and purposes might be.
Yeah, absolutely. So there we go. Ben, I think you really bullseyed it right there with like, for the audience of like where you are in your journey. And wherever you are through that spectrum, we can help you. I will tell you personally, I've had, a decade and a half experience in the hospital side. Many of the folks on our team come from the hospital as well. They are former directors of sustainability. They are former sustainability analysts. They are former healthcare engineers. So our team has a very deep expertise in this space. And I think you really summed it up by saying like, we just want to help you. So whether that's on identifying a starting point within your organization or working on your energy procurement agreements, or maybe building out a sustainability committee or putting together the elements of a decarbonization plan, like we are capable of helping you whenever and wherever you are. So I think the next slide is going to come up here. We're going to throw a poll question up here. Before we do that, we're just going to leave our information here. So again, I'm Steve Schramm. This has been Walker. I hope you found this educational and helpful. I will be at the ASHE conference next month. So if there's anybody here that will be in attendance, very much look forward to meeting you. And there's my poll question. This is really helpful for us. We just want to know if there's any particular items that you would like us to follow up with, and we will send this presentation as a follow-up. And if nothing else, really just appreciate you joining us for the hour here this afternoon.
Yeah, great. I think we can probably close the poll here now too. Yeah, I just wanted to cap that to say thank you for your time. I know it's valuable, especially in the middle of the day like this, in the middle of the week, in the middle of the summer, when a lot of people are out. So appreciate everyone joining.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much.
Take care. Be well.